Well, as Abigail said, my name is Aubrey Wentz, and my family and I have been attending Hope Culture Church for about 2 years now. And today, in the theme of goodness, I wanted to talk to you about God's goodness. And I'm really glad that Marisa and the team sang what they sang this morning because it's part of my message. This song by Bethel Music called Goodness of God. And for the past 5 years, God has had me on a really intentional journey to uncover and solidify my relationship to His goodness. And in that song, as we sang in the bridge, it says over and over, your goodness is running after me. But I can vividly recall a time where I actually said out loud, I think God's goodness is running away from me. That's how it felt. It was the fall of 2021, and my role at the organization that I had been at was eliminated due to some restructuring. It was a role that I had waited 15 years for. I had waded through some challenging and painful situations and had finally landed a role that I felt like I was made for. My vocational journey had started to feel pretty predictably painful, actually. But I had heard from God on multiple times to wait, to endure, and to be patient. I was trying as best I could to trust that my good God was shaping something good in me through it all. Well, I was quickly placed in another role on another team within that organization, and so I got back to work, constantly seeking out God's purposes for me in this situation. During this year, my husband, who had worked for the same organization, felt God inviting him to leave and seek out something else. And in this process, he came across his dream job. But that job would require us to move out of state, away from all of our family, with our 3 girls. So we went and we visited, he had some interviews, and I was being so open and listening to God. I went on a hike in the mountains, but I really only felt dread. I remember looking at Matt over breakfast our last morning there and just saying no, which is unusual for me because I'm a team player and I'm really usually up for the adventure. So this sent us into one of the most difficult times of our marriages, and every time we tried to talk about the move or the job, we'd just fight. We were both heartbroken that it was happening this way. Matt felt like he couldn't say no to this job, but he also couldn't imagine asking me to do something I felt so opposed to. And I was feeling more and more like a part of me was going to wither and die if we moved. I know that sounds extreme, but that's like the level of dread. But I also couldn't imagine looking at my husband and asking him to say no to his dream job. We were really at an impasse. So it was during this that we reached out to a dear friend to help us do some processing. And at our first meeting, she asked us if we were familiar with the prayer of indifference. Sounds lovely, doesn't it? Well, Ruth Haley Barton describes the prayer of indifference this way. The prayer of indifference expresses the fact that we have come to a place where we want God's will. Nothing more, nothing less, nothing else. It means we want God's will more than our own personal comfort or safety, more than ego gratification or wanting to look good in the eyes of others, more than our own pleasure or preference, more than whatever it is we think we want. It's a state of wide openness to God in which we are free from undue attachments and have the capacity to relinquish whatever might keep us from choosing for God and for love in the world. It's a prayer in which we abandon ourselves to God. My friend then went on to explain and clarify that we can really only pray the prayer of indifference from a place rooted in the truth that God is good, which I firmly believe, and that God pours goodness out on me every day. And when she said that part, I started to cry. Because while I did believe that I served a good God, I had lived a lot of years where it did not feel like God was pouring goodness out on me every day. And this dear friend of mine looked over the table at me and lovingly encouraged me to enter into a journey towards a different kind of relationship to God's goodness. So being the good student that I am, the next morning I woke up really early, I sat down with my Bible, and I asked God, okay, where do you want me to start reading? Lamentations. Okay, let's try that again. God, where do you want me to start reading? Lamentations. For real, God? The saddest, most depressing book of the Bible. Yep. So I went to Lamentations 1, because again, good student. For those of you who might not be familiar with the content of Lamentations, allow me to read some for you. Let's just start at the beginning of Lamentations 1. How deserted lies the city, once so full of people. How like a widow is she, who once was great among the nations. She who was queen among the provinces has now become a slave. Bitterly she weeps at night. Tears are on her cheeks. Among all her lovers, there is no one to comfort her. All her friends have betrayed her. They have become her enemies. Okay, wait. All right, let's fast forward. How about Lamentations 2? Let's go there. How the Lord has covered daughter Zion with the cloud of his anger. He has hurled down the splendor of Israel from heaven to earth. He has not remembered his footstool in his day of anger. Nope, no better. I kept reading, though, through the first 2 chapters of Lamentations, reading words of pain and destruction, separation and loneliness, all feelings that I had been saturated in for the last 18 years. And then, as I was reading through the 3rd chapter of Lamentations, wondering why God had brought me to this painful book when I was trying to encounter his goodness in a new way, I came to Lamentations 3, verses 21 to 26, and it says this. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is his faithfulness. I say to myself, the Lord is my portion, therefore I will wait for him. The Lord is good to those whose hope is in him. To the one who seeks him, it is good to wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. My friends, I sat there and I sobbed. I was stunned to find this break in the lament to proclaim God's goodness so confidently. You see, God's goodness is not dependent on my circumstances or on my own activity. God's goodness is an extension of the essence of who he is at his core. God's nature is good. He can't not be good. My job then isn't to strive for his goodness, but to become a student of its activity in my present life. There are days when this is more difficult than others. And on the really hard days, I have to be so diligent to see God's goodness. Sometimes it's as simple as like a really great parking spot at the grocery store, right next to the cart corral. It's my fave. Or sometimes it's an unprompted hug from my newly tween oldest daughter. So I started naming these moments of goodness out loud to my husband. He would frequently hear me describing something, and then I would say, but this part, that was God's goodness to me today. And most recently, God has been teaching me that practicing seeing his goodness will actually prepare me to be rooted in it when, by worldly standards, it might seem far away. You know, firefighters don't wait for the emergency to start their training. They start training and doing drills when the stakes are low, so that when the stakes are high, their brains are hardwired with how to respond. So today, I wonder, what's your relationship to God's goodness like? Do you know and trust that God is good even when life is not? Are you a student of God's goodness, practicing and training yourself to recognize it when it's easy, so you will naturally look for it and find it when life is hard? Our good God is pouring goodness out on you every day. Thank you.